when we hurt, it's because things are causing us to feel that way. And when we feel joy, it's because, things are causing us to feel that way. But one thing that we have the power is how we respond in each and every single moment, how we talk to ourselves. Do we take on the things that people are saying or what's happening and demean ourselves and beat ourselves down further? Or do we look at it and just think life is a very interesting, colourful, textured experience, and from this point onwards I'm going to move in this direction which feels good to me? And that's just what I do every day, most interactions, and that shows up a lot in my work.
Welcome back to another season of Third Culture Africans. I'm proud to say Africa's #1 award-winning career and entrepreneurship podcast, voted for by you at the African Podcast and Voice Awards. I am Zeze, your host. I'm obsessed with all things entrepreneurship, and our show is dedicated to igniting your entrepreneurial journey, sharing resources, and giving you the tools to pursue your dreams fearlessly. We celebrate artistry and stories from those brave enough to create something and succeed. Inspiring, motivating, and full of wonder, discover how those who succeed do it. Your support helps make this show bigger and better. Please leave a review on Apple Podcasts and join our community with weekly newsletters curated just for you. Let's connect on Instagram and Facebook at Third Culture Africans. Sit back, relax, and let's do this. Hi, Chaneen. Thank you for joining us on this week's episode of Third Culture Africans.
Hi.
I have here, and I always do this, a short bio, which hopefully is a nice introduction to giving you your flowers. You are a creative, a writer, a poet, an artist, teacher, designer at Chic and Discreet, a mother, social media personality, also known as a Mumfluencer, a mental health advocate, an empowerment coach, and a breastfeeding advocate. Did I get it all?
I was tapping my heart in gratitude because you were the first person who got it all, and now I don't feel like I have to do it all myself.
Amazing. You are the definition of a multi-hyphenate in 2022. I thought I got that hat down pat, and then once I started doing my research for this episode, I was like, okay, hats off to you, girl. You have killed it with a T.
Thank you.
Incredible. So I guess we can start off with, early years. Your father's, Nigerian, your mother's Rwandan, but they both grew up in the UK. And you've sort of decided to go down a very creative path, which for our cultures, as Africans, often there's some resistance with parents when that is your choice. How was that for you in the early days where you basically said to your parents, hey, I want to go to university, and guess what? I'm studying English.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, I never even said that to them. I was one of the first in my family to go to university. And I think being, having parents who grew up here who are mostly British, they were just like, do you know what? You're going to follow your path, and we just trust that you're going to go your own way. I think since I was really young, I remember being 11 years old and they gave me permission to be on the internet, and I was kind of an agony aunt to people. I didn't know who these people were, but they would kind of submit questions and I would write these really beautiful, elaborate answers. And I just, from my earliest memories, all I could remember was writing. So by the time I got to university, they were like, it's just the normal step for you, because they could kind of see who I was rather than what they wanted me to be. I did have my dad, he had gone to university, he was the only other one. But I did have my dad go, be a lawyer, because he's a lawyer. And he's like, yeah, it's really good. Law is respected in every country. And if you get your degree in the UK, and, he really was trying to kind of push that narrative. But equally, he said, at the end of the day, English and law are not very different from the perspective of studying it. So go in and do English, and then you can always convert later. So he had this vision that I would still go along with his way. But ultimately, my family just let me let me be me and do what I love, and that was always writing. And they could see that like studying in English literature and studying English language would just be the next natural step for me.
I think for most people, and this was true for me, it takes a while before you start to get confidence in your own words. Was there a pivotal moment for you where you felt like someone kind of gave you the pat on the back and said, hey, you can do this?
Yeah. And that person was my English A-level teacher.
Mm.
Because prior to that, like I said, in all of my like all cousins and uncles and aunties, like nobody really went on to university, and most of them kind of didn't really even get through college. So for me, I just thought I was going straight into work after school. And that's what I thought I was going to do. But my English teacher at the time, he was like, Chaneen, you're brilliant. And teachers would do this to me. They would kind of pull me to the side and really highlight my brilliance. But I didn't know what they were talking about though. So I was like, all right. So, but when I got here, I was like, what's the next step? And he said, go to uni and do English. And I said, okay, fine. And he stood behind me to make sure I actually did the application, because he kind of knew I was probably not on the best path. The friends that I was with, the things that I would, come into class after doing. And he was just like, I'm standing here until you've signed up and you've done it. And he was the person really who changed everything.
Oh, that's incredible.
Yeah.
So to say that you graduated with a first class in English
Yes.
literature and English language from the University of West England, can you imagine if you didn't? That experience would be somewhere else.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's helpful when someone else believes in us even before we do.
Yeah.
You've gone on to write 4 books. So
Yeah.
yay to English teacher if he ever comes across this episode, who has given us your gift. And your first book was Solidarity, and that was poetry mostly. And without putting the words in your mouth, your inspiration to creating that was born out of a huge shift in transition as a woman, which was becoming a mother.
Yeah.
You're best known for your candid sharing of that journey with humor, by the way. I love some of your like real meme things. I don't know what that's called, but they're absolutely incredible.
Thank you.
The locking in the bathroom thing. Yeah, that definitely.
You can resonate, you can relate.
For sure. But what was the turning point for you that said, hey, I'm going to actually go ahead and publish something?
It was just the realization that I could do things and I could have an impact. And it was social media that led me here. A lot of my journey, I would say, kind of just happened to me. It was other people believing in me, or other people, kind of pushing me along. And I was just following the flow of life. But it was starting my breastfeeding clothing brand, Chic and Discreet, and realizing how many mums would kind of say, I'm really struggling to breastfeed. I just need clothes like what you design. Can you make them for me? And then building a business off the back of that. And I always wanted to keep in touch with those mums in some sort of capacity, which is what also led me to creating like motherhood content, just so we can have a laugh about the things that we're going through, because it's not the easiest of journeys. And then I just felt like there's a lot that Instagram liked in terms of engagement, and there's a lot that I would have to do a lot of work to really get in front of people. And I thought my poetry is just a huge part of who I am. It's a huge part of my motherhood journey. If I was feeling stressed, I would turn to poetry. If I was feeling grateful, I would turn to poetry. If I wanted to capture a moment, I would turn to poetry and prose as well, like little bits of writing. And then I had so much, and I sent a few to a friend, and she said to me, you need to put this in the book. Like, this will change lives for mums. And I just said, okay, fine. Like everything, you'll notice a theme in my life, and it's just someone says something and I'm like, all right, then I'll do it.
Amazing.
Yeah. And that's what happened really.
But there's a playful and whimsical energy to what is, really strong messages in your work. And oftentimes as mums, the early years of that journey are really burdensome, because they're aspects of your identity that you now have never had to deal with. They're ideas around the things that you've you've sort of owned, which don't belong to you, whether they're societies or, your mother's or your grandmother's stuff. And you were able to connect the dots through your work and finding a way to relate to people. Is that something you've always done well, or is that something time and place it just happened?
I think it's something that I have always done well. Like if I'm gonna give myself flowers and just acknowledge how far I've come, like I mentioned, starting with the agony aunt journey on AOL. This was the times of AOL, even before MSN.
Dial
And
up.
I was, yes, exactly. And I was in these chat rooms and I was listening to people, listening to their lives, listening to their scenarios. And never once did I ever listen to anyone's scenario and think, you're a really shit
Mm,
person.
mm.
You don't know anything. I never felt like judging anyone. I always just could understand that people do things for a reason, people feel things for a reason. And I always kind of was able to relate to how I was feeling in the world. I was an older sibling, so I had a lot of kind of responsibility. My family, like I said, many of them didn't go to uni, so my mum worked 2 jobs and was hardly ever home. And my dad and my mum were separated, so we weren't like your collected
Nuclear
family.
family, yeah.
Yeah. So there was a lot put on me, but equally there was a lot of racism that I experienced, and I didn't realize that it was racism. I just thought this is what the world is like, and I was hurt. I was really just hurting a lot of my young life. And when people would share their hurts with me, I could relate from a place of understanding what it felt like, even though their scenario was different. So getting through, fast forwarding to motherhood and creating the work that I do now, it is just understanding that when we hurt, it's because things are causing us to feel that way. And when we feel joy, it's because, things are causing us to feel that way. But one thing that we have the power is how we respond in each and every single moment, how we talk to ourselves. Do we take on the things that people are saying or what's happening and demean ourselves and beat ourselves down further? Or do we look at it and just think life is a very interesting, colorful, textured experience? And from this point onwards, I'm going to move in this direction, which feels good to me. And that's just what I do every day, most interactions. And that shows up a lot in my work.
Mm. You said something which I thought was interesting. At the height of your pain with dealing with some of these social issues like racism, and we'll come to that, it is in my notes. Um, you were being the agony aunt to other people.
Mm-hmm.
Was there something, and I know what a psychologist will say about, you're hurting, so there's some relief in being helpful to someone else, and acting out what you hoped someone would do for you. Did you find that in any way cathartic or therapeutic?
Yeah, yeah. Naturally, just hearing what somebody else would have to say and kind of just being their support and saying some words that felt good, I would be feeling good because I'm hearing those words too. So ultimately I'm speaking to myself and I'm learning how to be kind in emotion. I'm learning how to look at these things. Until this very day, I still just I feel like I draw people to me and we will have deep and meaningful conversations. And we may not be the closest of friends and see each other
Mm.
every week, but just being able to have like a few really deep conversations creates such bonds. And I feel like I do that. I've done that from young, and I had these bonds with these strangers. And it's
Yes.
funny because I'm now this on Instagram, and it's happening sort of again. But now it feels a lot more personal because I'm an adult. I'm doing it in various forms. I accept as well when I've had enough and I'm switching off from the world. And so I know myself very well when I'm like, okay, I don't want to hear anybody else's anything. But yeah, it's just something that I've done. I've always done, I've always enjoyed, and I've always found it helpful for myself.
There's a vulnerability to where you've sort of always approached your work. And within our culture, as Africans and also as women, there's always this shame always arrives in the picture. And I wonder, and especially living out, your family life on the internet and on social media, oftentimes people speak about the positives, and sometimes not enough of the negatives. And you started off with, you know, the first instance being encountering racism while you were young. How have you dealt with people's perceptions of you as you have evolved and are evolving through everybody else's screen?
Mm. Yeah, so let's just say not very well. I have seriously struggled, but a lot of it has just, without the information coming down to you and the knowledge coming down to you to say that this is someone who's struggling, this is not right, you shouldn't feel this way or think these things. You don't know that it's not normal. You just think that, well, this is just what life is like. And it was only after becoming a mum, really, that I realized that my self-perception wasn't always the best. It wasn't something that stopped me in life. I just was like, well, I'm blick, I'm ugly, I'm lanky, I'm skinny, I look anorexic. And these were all things that other people had said to me, and I had accepted as if they were, and there's nothing I can do about them. So I'm just going to carry on and be happy with not with myself, but just be happy. And, I carried that. I really carried that. And I thought that that's what everybody thought of me. And I thought that that's what everybody was always thinking. But there's nothing I can do. So I'm going to carry on in the world. And after having my first daughter, I had some therapy, because previously I'd had insomnia and depression, which, my mum was able to catch. I didn't catch it myself because, again, I just thought this is just life. But my mum was able to kind of be like, babe, you look like you're struggling. Let's go and take you to the doctors and see what they think. And so I had therapy, and I learned so much just from that initial session. And I was embarrassed by going to therapy because, when I went, it was, oh no, people who go crazy, Black people don't need therapy, they need chicken. Like, I just heard the dumbest things, like, literally. And I just would be like, oh no, I shouldn't be going. So I'd be sneaking off there, but I was learning so much, I was gaining so much. And that led me on a journey to looking at like self-help books and self-development and watching inspiring people on YouTube and practicing gratitude. And through my journey of just seeking out ways to think about life, think about myself, think about other people, I was able to realize that I was holding on to a lot of negativity around my self-perception as a result of bullying, basically, and racism and all of that from my past. Now, when I look at myself, if I ever look in the mirror and I'm saying something like, oh, you should do eyebrows, or oh, you need to moisturize your face, I will immediately kind of snap out and be like, you're beautiful, like, wow, wow. And it's come to a point where, like, someone will be complimenting someone else, and I've sometimes thought they were talking about me, because now now the filter that I see life is that people look at me and they see beauty, because that's what's happening. I also think that the collective shift from, being Black and being African as something so horrible to being Black and being, as melanated as I am, to be so beautiful, there has been a shift.
Gosh, girl.
And
huge shift. I was about to go melanin magic. Like,
yes,
we went from an era where if you were dark skinned, like you, and you've got a beautiful complexion.
Thank you.
And I've got a dark skinned daughter, and actually I wanted a dark skinned daughter.
I love that.
That's what I wanted. I was like, fingers crossed, God, please just I don't want a light skinned baby, just give me a dark skinned baby.
Give me a dark skinned baby. Yes.
And purely because, it's what we believe about the color of our skin, right? That there's a huge, in my mind, dark skin is beautiful, and it's just, there's something just so alluring about it. And growing up, especially in the UK, and I think we often don't speak about the impact of being in a Western society, and how early on you as a child get faced with another child labeling your differences negatively. And I know that's something I've had to deal with, and my daughter's only 4, and it's something I've dealt with since she started nursery at 2.5 years old. And that is really early. Like if I think of my childhood in Africa, we all were Black.
Yeah,
We all
yeah,
were
yeah,
African. There were some
exactly.
white children that we saw and knew of, but we weren't labeled. Our features weren't labeled in any way, and negatively. And growing up in the Western society and being confronted with your, not just your race, but now all of a sudden someone's labeling your features and categorizing them, it does something early on that it doesn't matter then, less so now. And we were speaking about it earlier on before, we came and I hit record, but less so now. But thinking of sort of the 80s, the 90s, and being a Black kid from that generation in the UK, we have seen us go from undesirable to desirable. And all of a sudden now everyone wants to eat jollof rice and listen to Afro beats.
Yes,
Like,
exactly.
sometimes I think I'm in the twilight zone. Like I'd walk into a room, um, and even just the interest in culture, in dress, in colors, in all of the things that growing up we felt conscious of and felt that we needed to hide, because there's this need to fit in, right? In the beginning, you kind of want to fit in. And that transition is happening, has happened. But for those of us who began the journey on the slightly less exciting end of the stick, there is that narrative in your head that you then have to start considering. And I wonder if we don't speak about it enough because it's something we don't want to address, but we're living versions of it through our own children. And there's something re-traumatizing about that experience. But at the same time, what does that do for you in your psyche, knowing that now the things that were once ridiculed are now seen as being beautiful?
Yeah. Well, well, I've got so many answers right now. Where do I start? Let's just get right to
Mm.
the last question. For me, I just see it as further confirmation that everyone, that society, that the mass, they don't have any authority over anything, because one minute it's this and then it's this, but then it's that again and then it's this, but then it's this with this and then it's that, and then this is okay but now that's not. And it's just like, well, you guys can fluctuate and be fickle as much as you like, but I'm going to stay grounded now in the knowledge that I have, because of the work that I've done to undo all of this nonsense that you taught me. So that's where I personally am at. But I think on the grand scheme of things, like you were saying that you've had to work with your daughter because since she started nursery, she's been labeled, or she's been, just kind of bringing up some of these things that you're aware that you're really young to be experiencing this, especially since your own early years were in Africa and it wasn't the same sort of thing.
Very different.
And yeah, and I had something similar with my daughter when she was 4, and I actually shared this online, and I've got the brand in particular that was responsible to hire more Black people and Black dancers on the stage and stuff. But I had a period where my daughter said, "Oh, we went to a show and it was supposed to be really diverse with everyone represented just like their dolls are, but it wasn't. Everyone on the stage was either white or light-skinned mixed race with dyed hair, so everybody looked white to my daughter. And after seeing that, she loved it. They're dancing so good, they're this, they're that, but you know what, I don't want to be Black anymore because I want to be like them so I can be a dancer. And that's what she said to me, and I
Yeah.
was like, yo,
Breaks your heart.
okay, yeah. Like if she never said anything, I probably would have let that go, as this is just where we live and this is what still happens. But because I could see she was impacted, and when she said it, it seemed like such a throwaway statement that I was like, I can't let this be thrown away, because if I let this go, she's just going to think it's normal to not want to be Black. She's going to think it's normal to see, a cast of white people being dancers, and that's what it takes. And the irony is, the dances that they were doing was hip hop, was street dance. It was dances that are usually typically associated with Black people, but there were no Black people on the stage. And so I went back to the brand and I said, this is unacceptable. This is what's happened. And they couldn't apologize enough. And they had expressed that they didn't have anyone who was Black or of any ethnic background making any decisions. And I said, well, you know, they've now employed people. But that really made, that's where I began to address issues around my identity and my own upbringing and my own childhood and the narrative that I was fed and the things that I thought about myself. It brought up so much for me. And you know, I've been conscious of it ever since, and I'm very conscious of having images of Black women, Black families around my home on the TV. Even if we're like not really watching anything and we're playing, we'll have maybe like Bino and Fino in the background, or we'll have like Karma, or we'll have, you know, we have. I just want the girls to see you can be Black and you can be on the stage dancing. You can be Black and you can be doing whatever you want, because your value is in who you are and not in the stories that you're told.
Yeah. You've taken that theme into other facets of your life, and I'm jumping about a bit here because you touched on you know, taking the brand to task. Breastfeeding. Yes. I have seen you in adverts, on billboards, on the tube, with your tits out. I personally breastfed till my daughter was 3.
That's amazing. Yeah, same as me.
And she was just a little bit over 3. But you know, I went as long as that. And I remember before I became a mother, someone telling me they breastfed their child till they were 18 months. And I thought, my God, why would you do that for so long? They have teeth. And I had many opinions.
Yeah.
And then I became a mother. And then I also started to read up about breastfeeding. And I had a child who wasn't really interested in anyone else but me and my boobs. And what became glaringly obvious, and the first time I came across your profile was around that time, was when I started, because my first is 4, so just a few months younger than yours, I believe. And when I started that journey, one thing was obvious to me. There aren't many Black women who are openly talking about breastfeeding. And then I thought, how can this be and why? And so I went on to Google because I love data and stats. And one of the most shocking things was that we have the lowest initiation rate. You know, at 3 months, we breastfeed, I think it's 58% less. And that number increases at 6 months and just keeps rising. And there was something in those numbers that made me sad, because as a breastfeeding mother, I know that is a privilege. The time it takes, you have your job. Like if I was working a typical 9-to-5 job and I only got however many months maternity, and then you start to look at the economic stats of, you know, the average African Black or Black mother in general. And then you start to think of economically, what is our role in our families, in our homes? How quickly do we need to bounce back to then start generating an income? What is our support structure? What is the economic status of each person, like the family? And then you realize that, without being political, this is yet again something else that from the jump we are at a disadvantage. And something about that made me very sad. And I wonder if for you, in choosing to advocate and share so openly, you know, your breastfeeding journey, tandem feeding, then having 2 kids, what was that moment for you that you decided that this is something I'm going to not just speak about, but this is a mantle I'm going to carry.
Yeah. And this is why I really love the work that I get to do. I am truly so grateful. Like a lot of what I go into never really comes from a place of I have to do this, I have to be the one, but it's always a place of I love what I'm doing so much that I can't help it. It just pushes itself out, if that makes sense. It's just like the very first tandem feed, I took that photo with my toe and I was holding both my girls. They were both on my boobs and I was looking down at them and I was ecstatic. It was literally like I had just been pumped with ecstasy or probably oxytocin, but because that's a hormone that's boosted when you are breastfeeding, when you have your babies. That's a hormone of love.
Yes.
And it was a double dose and then some. And I really, really love that. And the image is definitely not like one now. I'd look at it and think, oh, if I could have styled that, if I knew, it would have been different. But it was so real, so raw, and so full of joy. That smile was part of a good few minutes of laughing out loud. And then I shared that and lots of people were like, what? Wow, we've never seen anything like this. A lot of my family wasn't sure what the heck I was doing. They were like, why are you
exposing yourself?
Yes, exactly. Like, don't you feel like this is too much? Don't you feel? And I was just like, no, I don't. I'm happy that I was so happy, and I want other people to be happy, and I want them to be supported and to know that there's this way as well, especially because people like you guys are saying it's too much. That's probably why most women who are doing this are not sharing their journeys, and they have reasons why they don't want to share it. But since I became vulnerable sharing my mental health journey, I now have no issue sharing anything. I felt like if I had anything to hide, it would have been the fact that I just didn't feel okay some of the time. And I'm not hiding that. So there's nothing to hide. And I don't think it's over the top. I don't think it's too much. I don't think it's sexualizing breastfeeding. I don't even think of breastfeeding as that. So I was just sharing, and it really gained so much momentum. And the rate at which women would come to me and say, I was going to stop at 6 weeks because everybody said I should introduce the bottle, but because of your journey, because of your pictures, because of your videos, I'm still going. I'm going to keep going. That was just more fuel to the fire. That was like more pumping of oxytocin. That's like more, this is great. Like, it's doing good for me, for my babies, for other mums, for their babies, for their families. And so I just kept going with it. And now I've finished breastfeeding. I stopped breastfeeding Ocean a few months ago. I still, I don't share it half as much, but I still will. If it's like a breastfeeding day, breastfeeding week, or if I've been having a few conversations, I'll probably still post content around it and reach out to mums and encourage them, because it is growing. There are more Black mums who are sharing that journey, and I absolutely love that. But it's something that I want to be a part of, because until it is normalized, until people stop telling us that it's too much or they're too old or that we should stop, until that happens, then there's no reason for me to stop.
And there's something about your candidness that seems to create this level of friendship, and it makes you seem fearless.
And I love that.
and I wonder though, in that journey, you would openly share, your stretch marks and scars. Now we see it in other cultures where women are given permission to share those things. But somehow within our community, there's comment to that, and the beauty and the art then gets lost, and then it becomes, oh, but hold on, and I ask that because I wonder if for you, when confronted with those instances, what that makes you feel like, because you're not posting anything that is different to any, and I don't mean different in the sense that it's not unique, but different in terms of sharing openly your journey. Why that? And you have some incredibly beautiful images. One of my questions is, who takes your pictures?
Well,
because it's art, right? There's something in your journey that is beautifully captured, and it's not something we see often. And if we look through time and history, especially for Africans and African culture, your style or expression through your art, whether that's imagery or poetry, is something that is cultural, that exists, but somehow is lost, and then in the Western context has a slightly different lens. How does that feel for you within yourself when you decide to share all, bear all
mm.
in the way that you do?
It just feels like a calling. It feels truly just like this is what I'm meant to do. This is what my purpose is. And I think that became solidified when it kind of also merged with my career, when I began to be able to make a career out of it. And I realized that this is what they meant by you can do what you love and make money from it and help people and inspire people and feel good about it. Because, you know, I meet people, and it's particularly mums who are not ready to go back to work, but I
Mm,
meet people who are in work and in jobs that do not suit their lifestyles. It does not suit their mental health. It doesn't suit what they want for themselves. It doesn't suit their vision. It doesn't suit their family, but they feel stuck in it. And for me, I just feel a massive sense of gratitude every time. Whenever I've ever been faced with someone saying, "Oh, you know, you're overexposing or you're doing this," I just would put it down to, and I think breastfeeding helped me a lot with this, because when I realized nobody knew what they were talking about when they talked to me about breastfeeding, and I knew because I had done the research and I was currently breastfeeding, I could also put it down to nobody knows what they're talking about when they have judgments and
mm,
when they have things to say that doesn't support me. And so moving in the direction of just continuing to do what I felt like I was called to do, what I feel like I'm still called to do, it just always feels like something to be so very grateful for. And as with everything in my life, I always try to move into the direction of gratitude and thankfulness. And that's what I do. Every image that's, you know, every beautiful image, every beautiful poem, it really is just a message from my soul out, rippling out just everywhere, saying thank you for this experience of being a human being. Thank you for this experience of being able to own my humanness. Thank you for this experience of being able to connect with other human beings in the way that, like you said earlier, is kind of like a friend. It's kind of
mm,
like a friendship. And I feel like I'm so lucky because, you know, for me, being a content creator and being on social media is not a numbers game, because I feel like if there was so many people, how would I have this connection with them? But I've also been shown that even just through a video, so many people deeply feel like they can connect with me and my story. And that's because of the way that I share it. And again, it just truly is because I'm grateful that I'm living this experience. And I know that so many people are in places or in situations in life where they don't want to be. I never want to come across as I'm like boasting, I'm so this, I'm so that. I always want to come across as life is life is full of everything, no matter where you are and what you're going through. But we can always connect with one another and feel uplifted, even just for 1 minute, even just for a minute or 30 seconds, however long a video can take.
mm.
You can feel connected to someone, and in that moment, just the shift in your perspective can change your entire day, can change your week, your life ultimately. And that is the purpose behind everything that I create.
You've done it incredibly well. You know, you've been featured everywhere, down to Vogue, Vogue Italia. That moment, probably when you're like, yeah, look at this, Vogue Italia and Vogue want my boobs out.
Yeah, yes, exactly.
um, and those features for you, and the recognition you've had for your work. You know, you've spoken about how that is a form of validation and now being able to make a living from it. Do you consider yourself an artist?
Yeah, I think I do. I don't have one art form that I'd say my main art form. I can't say my main one. It flickers, it changes all the time. I would like to say poetry and writing, because that's where I spend a lot of my time. You know, my captions are very long. I've been told this by my mum, by my agents, by my friends. Chaneen, you're writing essays all the time. And I'm like, great. One day I'll take them all back and put it into a book. But, you know, I'd say writing definitely is my main form of art, but self-expression can come in any way. And I think that the healthiest way for me to exist and to show up in the world is by expressing myself through how I feel like in that moment is the best way. So you might catch me flinging my arms in the air, spinning around like a ballerina, or you might catch me with my head like so into my journal and I just won't stop writing, my hands are aching. Or you might catch me painting on the balcony with my children and all these other friends and children that come over, because I feel like I have such a bond with children as well, and they are so creative. I'm inspired by them all the time.
Is there a part of you that has had to deal with the prescriptive, here's what you should be doing versus what you've chosen to do?
Yeah. And that is something I find myself going up and down in waves. So I'll go through a nice long period of being like, I'm just flowing, I'm just free, this is great, everything's working out. And then it's like, well, maybe now you should focus on being more organized or something, because somebody had said, oh, well, that wasn't very structured, and then I would take that and then it would sit with me. And then I'd be like, oh, maybe I should be more structured. And usually it's when somebody else comes along and offers some advice, usually well-meaning, but for who I am and the way that I work best, it doesn't work for me. But yeah, there's a lot of times where I'll sit there and be like, I should be doing this, but instead I feel like doing this. And when I go towards the should be, oh my goodness, it's a downward spiral from there. The longer I stay in that, you should be like this, I will try shoulding. You know what I'm trying to say? I will be trying to do the should, and I will be failing miserably, and I will be so miserable as a result, until I get to a point of like, I quit, I'm not shoulding anymore. And then I go back into flow and everything picks up again. So I've noticed it does happen to me, but ultimately I know for myself, I should never do anything anybody else tells me. And I should always go with how I feel.
Yeah. What's the biggest expectation you've had to deal with in your career now?
I'd say the biggest would be finding balance between my career and motherhood. And that is the whole idea of, you should be taking your children to school, or you should be picking them up, or you should be taking them to the doctors, or you should be doing their hair, or instead of, okay, you know, your children are important to you, and the maintenance of them and their lives and you and your life are important to you, but so is your career. If you can have help, that is great, well done. It's, instead of it being well done, you've found help, or you've been able to outsource things so you can do both. It has been a lot of, you should be the one doing it, you should be the one who's there, and so that's been a real battle, because again, I personally don't necessarily believe it, but it is something that comes up to mums all the time. Not me personally, but it is something, you know.
I know, it's a real battle, work-life balance.
Exactly, yeah. And just trying to find that has been my biggest battle, really.
There's often the conversation around being an independent, strong woman, right? And behind that statement is probably a woman who is crying out for help. Oftentimes, because, you know, motherhood isn't designed for one person, not at all, and historically never has been. What's a common myth about your work that you wish everyone would just stop?
One common myth that I absolutely detest is, oh, all you do is just take pictures and post them.
Yeah.
That is what people say. Like, people who look at what I do and maybe are a bit annoyed that it seems so easy, have said, you know, what, like, how can you say, you know, this is hard, all you do is take pictures? And I'm like, is that, like, that's what you think goes into it, but there is so much more to it. There's so much more that goes into being a content creator, and it is pretty new. I don't think it's so new, to be fair, but I do feel like it, like, for it to be more
The
broad.
medium is, but
Yes,
I think
exactly.
people have been content creators for a very long time
Yeah.
through different mediums. And those who are good at it, for anyone listening, are good at it because they work really hard at it. It's not that easy to do. Um, Leading on to my next question would be, how would you define success?
Oh, I love this question so much. Um, I, I, I would define success as a unique experience for every individual. And success to me is if I can maintain a life where I'm able to flow through my motherhood and know that I'm being a good mom and I'm holding space and I'm being open, I'm being honest, I'm showing up as myself, I'm teaching my girls how to love themselves, and at the same time be able to maintain my community, continue to create freely,
Mm,
and to have a good relationship with my husband. For me, that is success. And I feel like everything else that comes with it, for example, traveling, for example, money, for example, clothes, for example, all, the
mm,
kind of more materialistic things that people usually say when defining success, that comes with it because I feel successful in who I am. I feel like success is a feeling that you have, and it's like I said, it's an experience, and that's how I would describe it or explain it for me.
Favorite thing about yourself?
My vulnerability. I love it so much. I have tried to I've kind of pushed it down and I've just been like, oh well, not everybody's vulnerable. Maybe I shouldn't, that whole thing. But I actually really love it. I have no problem sharing my truth, no problem sharing, and that's one of my favorite things.
Thank you. You shared a few turning points for you, motherhood being one, and spoke about insomnia and your journey with that and mental health. What keeps you up at night now?
Nothing. That nothing. At this point, I'm sleeping really, really good.
That's so
Um,
freeing, isn't it?
yeah, it really, really is.
What got you to that point?
I believe it's my vulnerability and sharing with people around me how I feel, what I feel like I'm capable of, telling them very openly, these are my weaknesses. If you expect these things of me, I probably will fail. Don't be mad. Instead, let's work together to make sure that these things can be met and done. And everyone just kind of coming together and making it happen for me and with me. And that's why I really am big into vulnerability. And I would always encourage people to be vulnerable and open and speak their truths, because unless you're doing that, nobody truly knows what's going on inside your head and nobody can come to the rescue. They can only come and help you and support you when you open your mouth and say, this is what I need help with. And obviously, in order to do that, you kind of have to know yourself and what you are struggling with and why. So,
Mm.
yeah.
What do you wish you knew?
Mm. I wish that I knew. Oh, this is a tricky question. I wish that I knew how to speak Yoruba. There you go. That's not that tricky. That's what I wish. I wish I knew that. Like I said, my parents both basically growing up here, that neither of them spoke
Mm.
their original languages. And my husband now, he speaks Yoruba, but with his family, like on the phone or when they come over, which isn't often because they all live really far apart. And yeah, so I know that I grew up without that. My daughters, I don't want them to grow up without their mother tongue. So that's one thing that I wish I knew and I could work on. So let's see.
Yeah,
Check in with me in a year and let's see.
I think there's an app now. What's your favorite thing about what you do?
That I can tailor it to my needs and that I can work around my schedule and my children's schedule.
Mm. What's the best advice a mentor ever gave you?
Um, I'd say this mentor is my dad, and he said there's a saying that I always repeat, and it's if it's to be, it's up to me, and that's something that I basically live by. If it's to be, it's up to me, and whatever I want, if it's to be, it's going to be up to me. So I got to put in the work.
And probably the most important question everyone who follows you and thinks that influencing is easy wants to know is, how do you make it as a mumfluencer?
Yeah, I'd say again, I'm coming back to vulnerability. I think that's the most important one. Just, you're vulnerable anyway. Putting your face on the internet, putting your voice out there in any capacity, I feel like that is you kind of opening yourself up. But when you're talking about your motherhood and your motherhood journey, you're not going to be real if you're only dishing out, it's great, here's some nice looks, here's what I made in the snack box. That's not going to be content that really deeply resonates. It could be good, it could be, I mean, there are some people who are doing it really well, but for me, I'd say just being open and truly being able to connect, to be able to listen and to respond in an open and compassionate manner, where basically everyone is kind of on the same journey, in the same boat, and we're just supporting each other. I would say as a mumfluencer, that is vital. And then you can sprinkle on like some, beautiful and aesthetic tips and snacks and stuff. But I think at the core of it is just knowing who you are, what you want to share, and who you're looking to share that with. Yeah.
If you had to give any listener who is listening to this episode who understands or who understands some of the fears that come with having this drive to do something creative and is also a parent, but fears that their work or even their choices might not be enough, what would that advice be?
You know, I think the answer that I'm going to give is quite a spiritual answer. So it's not like tangible, go and buy this or do this, but ultimately is just that surrender, just trusting the process, trusting your vision, trusting in your creative abilities, and trusting that the reason why you even feel what you feel like in the first place, that you want to create, is there for a reason. So it is scary. I cannot tell you how many times I have been shook, but I was just like, we will see what happens. I believe it's going to be good. And it always has been. So I would say ultimately knowing you're going to face times when you feel like you cannot move past this point, or, if you do this, this is going to happen and this is not a positive, but you don't know what's going to come unless you open up and see what comes. And if you do that with a positive attitude and a positive mindset, and you take lots of inspired action, just trust that there is a force that will make it good for you.
Amazing. Chaneen, thank you so much. You have been an absolute bullet through this episode. Where can everyone find you?
Yeah, so I am mostly on Instagram at Chaneen Saliee, and that's spelled ChaneenSalie. You can also find me over on my website, my blog, which is by Chaneen Saliee, and on YouTube and TikTok. I'm just dabbling in all of the platforms because, like you said, there's lots going on with me.
and buy some books.
Buy some books. Exactly. You'll love them. It will be like a friend on your shelf that you can access anytime.
Thank you so much for joining us on this week's episode of Third Culture Africans. I feel as though you have given so much over the years with your journey. And I think for a positive image of motherhood and being a woman, I think you've given something that the world definitely needed, and you've done it graciously and beautiful. So thank you for that.
Thank you so much, and thank you for having me. I've really enjoyed my time.
Thank you. Thank you to over 20,000 of you that have tuned in and have continued to tune in. Because of you, our show is now distributed on Vodacom Africa's platform, My News. Your support helps make this show bigger and better. If you're a fan of the show, we would love to know. Please leave a review on Apple Podcasts and join our community with weekly newsletters curated just for you. Check out our free resources on entrepreneurship, productivity, finance, and leadership at thirdcultureafricans.com. You can now catch special episodes with video on YouTube at Third Culture Africans. Let's connect on Instagram and Facebook at Third Culture Africans. Let's do this.